Hey, Warhawk. So with this video, we're going to review the Age of Jackson. This one should be much shorter than yesterday's video. So we're going to go through a few things. There's really just about two or three key events, key things that I want to talk about with the Age of Jackson. So, first, Jackson is elected. He actually loses the election of 1824 to John Quincy Adams, and that election is decided by the House of Representatives because nobody gets a majority in the Electoral College. So, John Quincy Adams wins. It's called a corrupt bargain by Andrew Jackson's supporters, and so John Quincy Adams is actually only elected for one term. He loses re-election to Andrew Jackson. So in election of 1828, Jackson wins, and he runs as Democrat and uses the new campaign tactics, rallies, parades, nominating conventions to try to defeat John Quincy Adams. He's elected and seen more as a man of the common people. He grew up himself poor. He he was definitely rougher around the edges, kind of the hero of the common man. And so one of the things that's kind of been changing actually during this time is that a lot more, you don't have to have property anymore to vote. And so that's one of the things that helps to make or Andrew Jackson popular. Although he doesn't make that law, it's not like he made that change. One of the other things is he implements what's known as the spoil system, and so he replaced people that were in positions that were put there by John Quincy Adams or even people prior to him in political office, or not elected office, but in like appointments, and he appointed his supporters and people that he wanted to a level that hadn't been done in the past. All presidents did that to a certain extent. He did it to a much greater extent and really rewarded his supporters. Now, one of the things that was really upsetting to a lot of people is the Tariff of Abominations. And they thought that when Andrew Jackson takes office, that he will do something about it, but he actually doesn't do anything about it right away. He doesn't support it. It's the Tariff of 1828. He doesn't really support this tariff, but he's not nearly as opposed to it as a lot of Democrats were, and so they were disappointed he doesn't do something about it. And his vice president, John C. Calhoun, argues that Southern states have the right to nullify or cancel the law. And so he is really upset about that. And he says, no, you can't do that. And he forces people to, he says, I will send the army there to force South Carolina to collect that federal law. And this issue of nullification, that a state can nullify or cancel a law, is an important issue at this time because this is one of those issues that had come up before, and it comes up again over and over because do states have the right to cancel laws that they think are unconstitutional or unjust? Ultimately, in the case of the Tariff of Abominations, with Jackson passing the force bill or saying he's going to fight to pass the force bill, South Carolina starts to relent a little bit, but only after they also start to lower it. So they lower the tariff and go to about passing the force bill, and now South Carolina backs off and they start to collect the tax. All right. What Andrew Jackson is most famous for is the Indian Removal Act. He passed the Indian Removal Act in 1830, and then here's a key thing that you may need to know about. So the Indian Removal Act and Worcester versus Georgia, these laws. So Worcester versus Georgia is a Supreme Court ruling. Worcester was a missionary to the Cherokee. The Cherokee had invited him there, but Worcester, he was also telling them and advising the Cherokee on how to deal with Georgia and to not give up certain lands and things like that with Georgia. Well, the state of Georgia is upset about this, and so they pass a law saying that Worcester can't be there without their permission. Well, and so they put him in prison for like 4 years, or they say he's going to be in prison for 4 years, and Worcester sues and says, you don't have any right to do that. The Cherokee lands, they're in charge of it, and the United States has granted them that territory and said that they are sovereign there. And so, in other words, they are in charge there. Well, Worcester wins the Supreme Court case, which basically says that the states don't have the right to tell the tribes what to do in their territory. They're seen as sovereign, independent, almost like independent nations. They have to follow within certain guidelines of the United States, but they don't have to do what the individual states say. Well, Georgia goes ahead and does it anyway. Georgia ignores this this ruling and does it anyway. So this continues to keep Worcester in prison. Eventually, he's pardoned, and eventually, but they keep passing laws to hurt the Cherokee. Ultimately, the passage of the Indian Removal Act is going to lead to the Trail of Tears, where the different Native American groups are moved from the southeast to the territory of the Indian Territory in Oklahoma. Many of the Cherokee in particular on their forced march die. So probably about 4,000 of them die. This migration became known as the Trail of Tears. Now, it actually happens mostly during Martin Van Buren's presidency, who was Andrew Jackson's second vice president when he was reelected. Jackson was opposed to the Bank of the United States, and he has it. He is successful in getting rid of it. He opposes it and thinks it's a bad idea. He thinks it gives the bank too much power. It's a way for corruption to happen. It does regulate trade in certain ways and regulate monetary policy in certain ways that it can be helpful, but he feels like it's too powerful at the same time, and therefore leads to corruption. And to a certain extent, he's certainly right. It was powerful, and it did lead to corruption some, but not necessarily to the level that he was concerned about. Now, this is one of those things that the Federal Reserve is very similar today, and so even today, people will argue that the Federal Reserve is too powerful and controls too much, and at the same time, others will argue that the powers that it has helps to keep our economy moving more smoothly and keeps us from going through these big cycles, these dramatic swings in economic activity. They still happen, but they're not quite as dramatic as part of what people say that happens as a result of having a central bank. And so one of the key things that you're supposed to remember about Andrew Jackson is that he was accused of ruling like a king, and he was bad. If you're remembering the storyboard review. Just a quick turnaround or change of pace here. Talk about American literature. There's a lot of American. This is kind of really one of the times when we start to see specifically American-focused literature develop. Some of the most famous writers and authors of American history are during this time. Herman Melville writes Moby Dick. Washington Irving writes The Headless Horseman. Edgar Allan Poe writes his many different stories, many of them eerie and dark in nature. And so we start to see the influence of being in our own this nation, and we start to see the influence of the nature of the society and even the environment having an impact on the culture and the writing of the time. Uh, Something that sometimes is tested on with the American culture and development of specifically American style is the Hudson River School. Um, and it's called the Hudson River School because there's many artists that are famous, and they first started out around the Hudson River in New York. And so Thomas Cole is kind of the one of the founding members. Basically, if you see a picture that's a landscape and kind of dramatic picture like this one here with using light in powerful ways, where you've got light in dark areas, but just a big, huge, sweeping landscapes. It's the Hudson River School. Is what we're talking about here. And we see the influence of these are now American painters. They are not being necessarily being trained in Europe as the previous generation of American painters still had all their education and their training in European schools and European by other European artists, and now we start to see an American development of art. And James Audubon is famous for his illustrations and paintings and drawings of nature in particular, and specifically birds. So that is Andrew Jackson, and some key things, big key things here. Nullification crisis. Got to know the nullification crisis. Got to know Worcester versus Georgia, Trail of Tears, and the Hudson River School. Those things there. All right, y'all have a great day.